go ahead and get started. It is 3:30, and thank you so much for attending our webinar today. I know some of you, or maybe all of you, looking at our participants list, have had a snow day today or an ice day. So we appreciate you tuning in, possibly from home or from another location, to attend our NOWACA webinar, the Google Classroom Part 1. My name is Christy Hughes. I am going to be your host for this webinar series, Google Classroom Part 1. I also have Chris Malanga with me. He is on the chat box. His tag is chat host. So if you're having any questions or problems, or I'm in the middle of talking and you can't get a hold of me, please feel free to message him as well. But I am also monitoring that chat box. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my next screen here. And the reason that we're here, of course, for talking about the Google Classroom Part 1, because this is the first class of a series, Part 1 and Part 2. The objective for today is we're going to start at the real basic level, and we're going to talk about benefits of using Google Classroom, that really strong Google Drive integration piece, and then also the teacher-student communication. If you're new to Classroom, or even if you've used it for a little bit, and you're just trying to kind of figure out like where it kind of fits into your classroom, there is a really nice teacher-student communication, and also they've added a parent and guardian communication piece, which we will also talk about today. So I'll show you all of those things. So my name is Christy Hughes. I'm an educational technologist over at NOWACA. My contact information is down there below, and I have just a real brief description about myself. Once again, this webinar is recorded, and so you can always visit this at another time. And I do have links out there. We'll get to that screen in just a minute. We do have links out there for this presentation, so you can feel free to download this presentation and also listen to the recording at your convenience. So the resources for today, I have a Google Classroom manual. Those are just some short links that go out to Google Docs that have information about Google Classroom. The manual, I think it's like 15 pages or so, that talks about all the parts of Google Classroom. And then the Google Classroom checklist, that is where we at NOWACA, our Instructional Services Department, has gone through and made little instructional videos on how to do different things within Google Classroom, such as add students or create a class or use that parent-guardian information. So you can use both the checklist, the videos, and also the manual. So those are some short links that go out to those Google documents. Some webinar housekeeping, and I know some people had some questions. Thank you for sending those through the chat. Everyone is muted at this point, but please don't hesitate to ask any questions. You can definitely unmute yourself if you want to ask a question through the phone, or it looks like everyone's chatting, so I'm kind of keeping an eye on that too. So feel free to use that chat box. Make sure it's open, so please let us know if you have any problems or questions. If you'd like to follow along in your own Google account, please go ahead and do that. So you can go ahead and try it as I'm showing it, but certainly you can just watch and then try it at home or at your leisure. All right, so a couple last things that we'll talk about before we hop into Google Classroom. All of our training materials, and once again, I told you that this webinar is being recorded, but if you would like to go out and let's say that you're interested in other things other than Classroom, maybe forms or drawings or sites or Google Chrome, our website is training.nowaca.org, and that's where we house all of our materials. All right, and so then the last thing I'll talk about is our weekly tech tips, and we're just trying to get more people involved with this if this is something that you're interested in. We have every Tuesday now, we are sending out emails, and at the bottom there is a URL that you can go ahead and add yourself to the list. If you'd like to receive weekly emails about any kind of technology tips, now most of the time they're Google, but sometimes they're not. They could just be some time-saving tips and tricks. You can feel free to add yourself down at the bottom, and that is just a weekly email every Tuesday that goes out, has a few screenshots in it, and has some directions on how to do something new in technology. So feel free, if that's something that you'd like, feel free to sign up for that. All right, so we are to the Google Classroom part of this webinar. So once again, my name is Christy Hughes, and this is part 1 of the Google Classroom piece for our webinar series for the spring 2017. I should say winter spring 2017, as we're all looking at snow outside of our windows. All right, so let's start with why should I use Google Classroom? Okay, so if you're new to Google Classroom, or even if you are already using Google Classroom, I'm going to highlight some of these different items. So your Google Classroom is really your classroom outside the classroom walls. And so when we talk about that blended learning, when we talk about, you know, all these different applications that we can use to encourage student involvement when they're not in the classroom. It does have that strong integration with Google Drive, and I'm going to go ahead and show you that in a little bit, because what it does automatically for you is when you create a Google Classroom class, it will automatically create a folder inside your Google Drive, and it will label it Classroom. And if you open up that Classroom folder, you're going to have folders for each individual class that you may have. So let's say that you teach English 9 and English 10. Well, inside Google Classroom, automatically it will create a folder named English 9 and also create a folder named English 10. So it's going to automatically do some of those things, and it gets really, really neat when you start assigning assignments, because once again, it will start creating folders automatically for you to help you organize. And what's really nice too is that it does that for the students too. So it has a really nice, it follows the naming convention, the same naming convention for every single student, and it will automatically tuck those files away for them and for you. So you can post assignments, you can post announcements, links, videos, questions, you can assign your work, you can track it. It does also have a nice Google Calendar integration. So when you create an assignment or when you create a question, it will automatically put that for you in your Google Calendar. So what's really nice, if you have, you know, students that are using a paper copy of a weekly planner, or they're trying to get away from the paper copy of the weekly planner, your Google Calendar really is a nice fit for that, because when you assign something, it will automatically go to the student's Google Calendar for them. And so lastly on this slide, you can involve the parents in the communication. I will show you when we get to that Students tab how you can go ahead and do that. That is a newer feature of Google Classroom, and it's a really nice piece because that was always a question that people had. How do I get parents to know what my students have for homework, or how do I get my parents to know, you know, what's going on inside the class? So I will show you that part as well. So this is just a picture of that Google Drive integration. I just took a picture of my Google Drive with that classroom folder opened, and so these are just different classes that I have created in Google Classroom, and if you notice, it created a folder for each class. And so that's one of the things that Classroom does automatically for you, where it just does that, and then, you know, it just kind of tucks everything away for you, and you don't really have to do it at all. So each assignment even has a folder with student work in it. So just really, really neat things that kind of happen on the back end with Classroom that you don't really have to worry about. All right, so let's talk about how to get started. Now, if you're new to Google Classroom and you're looking at what we call the Apps Launcher, so we see these little 9 squares up in the top corner if you're signed into Google. Sometimes people call that the waffle menu. I've heard the Rubik's Cube, and, you know, and of course it's the Apps Launcher. Whatever you prefer, this is what you're going to click on. Now, by default, when you click on that, Classroom will not be there. Now, there is a way, using an extension, there is a way to add it. There's a way to customize this whole entire Apps Launcher. But by default, Classroom is not there. So you're actually going to want to click on that word More down at the bottom, and then go ahead and search for Classroom. Now, you can also, once you find Classroom, you certainly can bookmark it, because then it's really easy to get to. You can also just go to classroom.google.com. That will take you there also. Make sure that you are signed in. That is one difference between like a personal Gmail account versus a Google Apps for Education account, because Gmail account will not allow you to get into classroom.google.com. You have to have an educational domain in order to access that. But once again, once you get to it, I would just bookmark it, or, you know, make sure you can access it easily. When you start a class, you're going to see this plus sign up at the top. Now, as a teacher, you can join a class and you can also create a class. Students can only join a class. They will not be able to create a class. But teachers can do both. And the reason that they do that is if you have a professional development class going on within your district or within the ESC or somewhere where you want teachers to be in there to do some learning, that's why teachers are allowed to do both. Once you get in, of course, you can change the theme and add text and do some different things also. So we're going to go ahead and hop out of this presentation, and we're going to go into Google Classroom, and we're going to be able to see all these neat things that we can do within Google Classroom. So I'm going to hop over to my Classroom class here. And so I am logged in as Wilma Flintstone. She is my, she's my test user that I use for all of these webinars. So I see her up at the top corner. Now, before I kind of get into Classroom, I'm just going to back up here for a second, because what I told you when I was talking about to get into Google Classroom, I'm just going to back up here for a second. If I hop over to my Drive, when I was referring to that apps launcher, this is what I was talking about, your Google Apps. And so when you click on that, if you see Classroom there, you can go ahead and click on it. If you don't, you're going to want to click on that More button down at the bottom and then go ahead and do it. Of course, once again, you can just go to classroom.google.com, and that will take you directly to Classroom as well. Once you go there for the very first time, and Wilma Flintstone is already an established user, but if you go there for the very first time, it's going to ask you a question. It's going to say, are you a teacher or are you a student? And of course, this seems like a silly question, but you have to say that you're a teacher, because if you say that you're a student, you're kind of put in the student group, and then somebody has to change it on the back end. So again, if it's your very, very first time logging into Google Classroom, make sure that you're signed in with your educational domain, and make sure you scroll to the bottom and say that you are a teacher. Now, once you do that, you're going to see a plus sign up at the top corner. And this is where I was talking about you can join a class or create a class. Again, if you're kind of listening to me and trying this out on your own, you can go ahead, of course, and select create a class, and you can go ahead and type some text in there and apply a theme. I'm just going to pop into one of my classes just so I can show you all the different parts and pieces of Google Classroom, but feel free to go ahead and use that plus sign to create a class. If you're a student, you would want to go ahead and click on Join Class, and we're going to talk about how students can get in to Google Classroom as well. So I'm going to hop into this Google Overview class right here. So the first thing, if you look up at the top, you're going to see Stream, Students, and About. So if you're the teacher, you're going to see Stream, Students, and About. If you are a student, you're going to see Stream, Classmates, and About. Now, your stream is just going to be like your news feed. So this is where all this stuff happens off to the side. And so we'll talk about this in a minute. What I actually want to start with is the Students tab. So I'm going to hop over to the Students tab. And when I see my students, anybody that is inside of my class, I'm going to see them listed here. Now, there's two ways that I can get students into my class. And the first way is I can email them. I can invite them. So if I click on Invite Students, I will be able to put in any kind of email addresses that I want to invite my students. Now, if your students are already in like a distribution list or some kind of Google group or somewhere where you can just kind of click a couple times and they'll all be invited pretty quickly, that's an easy way to get students invited. They will all receive an email with a link, and they basically just click on that link, and then they're immediately added to your class. The second way that you can get students into your class is by using this class code. And if you look, I'm under the Students tab up at the top. So here's my class code. So I can pull my class into my classroom, get all my Chromebooks out or laptops, whatever kind of device you have, and just tell all of my students to go to classroom.google.com. I'm going to tell my students to click on that plus sign up at the top, and then I'm going to go ahead and have them join my class. And this is the code that they're going to put in. Now, as the teacher, I get this drop-down menu where I can reset this code or I can disable it. So if I needed to change it for any reason, I could just click on Reset. If I needed to disable it for any reason, I could go ahead and do that as well. But this code will stay the same. If a student comes in and I reset the code, all the students will still stay in there. It's just that the code may be different the second time around. So that's up to you. But that's where that class code is. So right now there's no manual way to get your students into your class. You're just either going to be able to email them by inviting them or in giving them that class code and having them get in. Once they're inside of your class, they're all going to be listed right here. Now, there's a couple different things that we can do underneath the Students tab. Over here, it says students can post and comment. Now, by default, when you post something, like if you ask a question or if you post an assignment or if you ask a question, or I'm sorry, if you add a discussion, by default it says students can post and comment. And lots of times when I teach this class, people will ask me, okay, Christy, what's the difference between posting and commenting? And the difference is posting, if you can kind of think of that as being like you're going to ask a question. I'm going to post something. I'm going to see what everybody else thinks. I'm going to post something. Commenting would be you're going to answer that post. So you're going to respond or you're going to reply. So that's the difference between posting and commenting. So if you're looking at this thinking like, well, no, I really only want the students to comment. I don't want them posting their own things. I just want them commenting. You can choose that. Or maybe this last one says only the teacher can post or comment. So each class that you start, you can choose how you want to do this. So this is per class. So maybe for English, I want them to post and comment. Maybe for, social studies, I don't want them to. So that would be your choice. The other thing here on the Students tab, while we're kind of talking about all these different options on the Students tab, if I go ahead and check a couple of these student boxes, or I can even check this box up at the top and they all would be selected. I have three dots off to the side. I also have this word actions up at the top. So I can go ahead and remove maybe any students that might have moved away. I can email them or I can even mute them. Like maybe I want to keep them as part of my class, but I don't want them responding to my post or commenting or, maybe they said something inappropriate. So I can keep them in my class, but I can just mute them so that they wouldn't be able to respond to some of those discussions. Off to the side, Guardian email summaries, and I'm going to preface with, if you're looking at your classroom class right now and you're not seeing this, this is something that can be turned on and off in the admin console. So if you're not seeing that, you may want to send a note to your tech person and just, inquire if that can be turned on. Once it's on, you're going to get a question that says, Guardians can receive a summary of their student work and class announcements. Do you want to include in this class? If you slide this slider over, now I get the option to invite Guardians. So where it says Guardians, I can go ahead and click Invite Guardians, and it's just going to allow me to type in an email address right here. So I can add another, I can add another, and I can add another. So if I have, multiple parents or guardians per student, I can go ahead and add everybody that I want to get those notifications from the parents or from myself about the students. Now what will happen is those parents or those guardians will get an email and they will say, how often do you really want to be notified about the student? So the parent or guardian will get to choose if they want weekly messages, if they want daily messages, or if they don't want any messages at all, because they can completely opt out and say, no, I don't want it. So once they decide, then it will start coming automatically. And so some of the things involved in that, they will get the announcements, they will get the assignments, and they will just get, based on that student or their child, information about that. So they don't see anybody else. They're not involved in your class. They don't see anybody else's grades or anything like that. They would just see their child's information. So that's a neat thing about the parent guardians, the new thing that Google Classroom just added. And these three dots off to the side, I can email the student. Down here, if there is a guardian, I can email the student, I can email the guardians, I can invite more, or I can even remove the guardians if they've changed their email address, or I want to, if they don't want to be included anymore. So all those different options that I can do within the Students tab. All right, so I'm going to hop over to this About page, and up at the top, so I'm just going to go ahead and click on About. All right, so here's my About page. Now, with your About page, I'm going to scroll down here for a little bit. So it says Google Overview Class 101, so I've typed that in. I can put a class description here, I can put a room number, and here's my calendar and so forth. One of the neat things about this About tab is over here it says Invite Teachers. So if you have an intervention specialist, if you have a co-teacher, if you have somebody else that helps you within this class, it would be great to invite them as well. Now here's the difference between a co-teacher versus you, the main teacher or the person that created the classroom class. The co-teachers are able to grade, they're able to respond, they're able to do everything that you do. The only thing they cannot do is they cannot delete your class. And so that's really helpful, that they can kind of help out with the grading and the commenting and so forth. They just can't delete your class. And what happens is when you invite them, they get an email that says you've invited them, and if they click on accept, then their name will also appear right next to your name up at the top, and then so the students would know that both teachers are teaching that class. So other things on your About page, I'm just kind of scrolling down here, add class materials. And when we get to this stream part, you're thinking, okay, well, this is cool to add materials, but where do I really put my assignments? You talked about announcements and questions and assignments. Where do I put all of that stuff? And here's how I'm going to answer that question. If you have assignments, if you have announcements, if you have ongoing questions that you're asking your class, that's going to be in your stream, because that's what the students are going to see all the time. And, just like Twitter and Facebook and all your social media, things tend to get buried, or they could. Now, of course, there's ways to sort them, but by default, if you put something out there and something else goes on top and something else goes on top, then what will happen is it will start to get buried. Well, in your About page, if you have things that you don't want to get buried, such as your syllabus, maybe class rules, maybe your, APA or MLA formatting, maybe some things that you want your students to have access to all the time without scrolling, I would put that in my About page. And so, for instance, I have a resources folder here, so we can even put folders out here. So then anything I put in that folder throughout the whole school year, all my students have to do is go to this About page, click on the folder, and then they would see all of those different, whatever it may be, presentations, spreadsheets, documents, forms, anything that I have out there can be in this folder. So I also have a presentation down here. Now I also could even put videos out here. So let's say that I had a YouTube channel. Let's say that I had, different links that I wanted the students to visit. I can go ahead and do that. And how I do all those different things is right here where it says Add Class Materials. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. I can give it a title or give it a name, and I'm just going to attach some kind of file. So this paperclip right here would indicate some sort of PDF file or some sort of, non-Google file. Of course, this indicates Drive. This would be YouTube, and this would be any kind of link. Now, your link can go out to any kind of web page. Your link can also go out to a Google Drive folder if you wanted it to. And I'll kind of define that a little bit more, because this folder, I'm a big fan of putting folders out there, kind of like what I was saying before, because if you put a folder out there and then throughout the whole school year, if you start adding more and more things to that folder, this folder on your About page will always show the most up-to-date version of that folder. So that's really the neat thing about doing folders. Now, to do a folder, even though it's in Google Drive, you would have to do it as a link. So if I would say, okay, I'm going to type in resources folder here, and we'll type in, we'll put 2 just so we can tell the difference. So here's resources 2, and I'm going to go ahead and click on that link. Now, at this point, what I would have to do is go back to my Google Drive account, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to find a folder. So here's this folder right here. I'm going to get that shareable link for this folder. So again, this can be any folder in your Google Drive, probably some sort of resources, probably some sort of folder that you want to give the students access to throughout the whole school year. So I'm going to click on Get Shareable Link, and it says anyone with the link can view. That's fine. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this link right here, and now I'm going to go ahead and just paste it over here in the link. And I'm going to say Add Link. Now it's going to pop up. It's going to give it, it'll take a second to fill in the image there. But now when my students click on this folder, it's going to automatically open up whatever folder I had in there. So Google Overview Resources, and then I have another folder inside of that. So that's what's really neat about attaching those folders, is that you can constantly put things in and out. And again, I always get the question too, well, can you take stuff out of the folder? Absolutely. So that's just kind of like an interactive folder where you could put stuff in and out all throughout the whole school year, and your students just go to it from this About page. In any case, you can feel free to put anything you want to on this About page, and it will constantly stay updated. Whatever you change will immediately be changed on your students when they look at your Google Classroom class. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the stream. So this is where all the fun stuff happens, where we can go ahead and post our announcements and our assignments and all this fun stuff. So right up at the top, it says Stream, Students, and About. Of course, we're on Stream. I like how over here on the side, it tells me what's due very soon. So it's giving me short and sweet, like what do you have due? Any kind of assignments or questions or announcements or whatever, it's going to tell me. Now these topics are pretty neat too. We'll talk about that in a second as well. This plus sign down at the bottom is where you're going to go ahead and go if you want to post anything. So if I click on this plus sign, I'm able to post an announcement, an assignment, a question, or I can even reuse my post. Now here's the difference. If I wanted to post an announcement, it's going to pull up a little box that allows me to post some sort of announcement. Notice how just like on my About page, I can go ahead and attach any kind of file right here. An announcement is something that you're going to post that you're not going to take a grade on. So this may be, you know, remember we have a 2-hour delay tomorrow, or remember to bring your Chromebook, or, you know, something like that where you can go ahead and post it and it will immediately go out to your class. Again, you can go ahead and post something or attach something if you wanted to. Now, some of the things I like about this part is an announcement and an assignment and a question will do the same thing, but look where it says for, and I can go ahead, if I have multiple classes, I can go ahead and drop that down and I could blast it out to all of my classes if I wanted to. So I certainly don't have to go into each individual class to go ahead and, you know, post the same thing. So I can do it all at once. So that's really helpful. So I can go ahead, here's my announcement. I'll just put announcement. Whoops. And I'm not gonna put a topic on there. So down here where it says post, I can post it immediately. I can schedule it to go out maybe tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., or I can save it as a draft. So let's say I wanted to add to it and I wanted to post it later, I can go ahead and save it as a draft. So I'm going to go ahead and save it as a draft, and what happens is up at the top where it says saved posts, I can go ahead and click on that, and here it is, announcement. And so when I click on that, now it comes right back up and I can finish typing, and now I can go ahead and post it. So, and it's going to say immediately, yep, that's fine, I'm going to click on post. So now I'm going to see that pop right up at the top. It has the accurate time. It has my Wilma Flintstone. I'm the teacher, and so now it is in their stream. These 3 dots off to the side, I have edit. If I want to edit this announcement, I can delete it, or I can even copy the link if I wanted to post it somewhere else. So I can go ahead and do that as well. Now this move to the top, and I'm going to go back, I'm going to go underneath and go to this one underneath this. Now if I move it to the top, that will bump it up to the top, and so now it's at the front, or the top rather, of my Google Classroom without me like having to move anything around. So when we kind of talked a little bit about possibly things getting buried, for instance, in your stream, that's a really easy way to go ahead and move it to the top, and then that way it will bump right to the top. Now I'm going to go ahead and go to another example. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll hop over assignment just for a second. I'm going to go ahead and click on question. Now, if I wanted to ask a question, and this is something that you can decide. If you'd like to take a grade on, you can take a grade on it. If you don't want to take a grade on it, you simply can ask a question. I love these questions here because these are awesome entrance or exit tickets. These are just great ways to, you know, figure out if everybody read their homework. These are just great ways to figure out if anyone's having any problems. So I can just type in, we'll just type in any questions. And what I can do at this point is down here I can give it instructions if I wanted to. I can also give it a due date and a due time if I wanted to. And over here is topic. Now, we talked about, again, if things get buried or bumped or whatnot, if I start to give things topics, this allows me to sort them very easily. So let's say that I was going to specifically ask a question about Chapter 5. So maybe I wanted to create a topic and name it Chapter 5, and then that way anytime I create a question or an announcement or an assignment, if I tag it with that topic Chapter 5, what we're going to see in a minute is over here on the side, and it's kind of grayed out so you may not be able to see it very well. But on the side of your screen, it says topics, and then it's going to start to list all of those topics. So the students can simply just click right on that topic, and it will show all of the things that were tagged with that topic, such as Chapter 5. So I'll show you that in just a second. Down here, I can give it a short answer, or I can also say multiple choice. So if I was going to do this for an exit ticket or an entrance ticket, I can simply say multiple choice, and I can say, hey, what's your comfort level? Are you super comfortable? Do you not know? What do you know? Or whatnot. Or I can make a short answer and have them respond with something specific, and then I would really know if if they know the content or not, because they'd have to respond with, some sort of sentence or something like that. Down here, we have some more sliders. So again, we're still on that question. Down here, we have some sliders where we can tell it, I want the students to reply to each other, which means that they're seeing each other's answers. So that would indicate more of some sort of a discussion board, or, some kind of where I wanted the thread to kind of just, maybe we did have a snow day. Maybe this was part of our Blizzard bag where they had to post a question and then respond to somebody else. So I can go ahead and slide that slider. And over here, students can edit their answer. So if you wanted to take a grade on this, I would probably recommend that you don't have them reply to each other, because then they wouldn't see each other's answers. But you do have the ability to slide that slider either way if you want to ask that question. So once again, down here, I can ask it right now, I can schedule it, or I can go ahead and save the draft. I'm just going to click on Ask just so you guys can see it pop up. So there it is, any questions, and it says 0 done, 7 not done. There are 7 students in my class, so that's why it's saying that. And notice how here's my topic. There's that tag, Chapter 5. Now, if you look over to the side, here's that word, topic. So here's Chapter 5 also. So if I would click on Chapter 5 over here, it's just going to sort everything out, and it's only going to show the assignments, the questions, the announcements that were tagged Chapter 5. So that really helps out when we potentially talk about things getting buried or, whatnot, because really if you're using those topics, then the students can just go ahead and click on the individual topics, and it will sort through all of the assignments, all of the questions, and all of the announcements so that they just see the items that they wanted to see. So this question here, I did do it as a multiple choice, so I'm just going to show you what that looks like. So which Google app do you have the most experience with? And I created a multiple choice question. So here are my different options. And if you've ever used Google Forms before, this should probably look a little bit familiar, because now I can go ahead and move any of these things around if I wanted to, and they'll just kind of move around just like they would in Google Forms. But so this is a multiple choice question. In a second, I'm going to bring a student side over just so you can see what that looks like. But when you're posting these questions, this is what it would look like. Multiple choice, and then short answer was the one that I did earlier. All right, so let me go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and go to my plus sign again, and I'm going to create an assignment. So here's my assignment. So once again, up at the top, and this is going to look familiar because it says for Google Overview Class 101. I also can drop this down if I wanted this assignment to go to all of my classes. I can go ahead and check the classes that I want it to go to. I can go ahead and give it a title. So we'll just stick with, we'll do a different chapter just so I can tag it to be something different so you guys can see what that looks like. Here's my instructions. I can give it a due date. And then topic. I can go ahead and create a new topic, or I can add any other topic that I might have used in the past. I'm going to go ahead and name it, we'll just say Chapter 2, just so you can see what that looks like. And then now with your assignment, once again, I can go ahead and add a file if I wanted to, or I could just tell them to do some sort of file. So typically, just to kind of give you an example of how this works, if I wanted to add a file, let's say that I wanted them to do a journal entry. I can attach a file for them, and Google Classroom will make a copy of that file and put it all in their Google Drive accounts, if I wanted it to. Now, on the contrary, if I didn't want that, if I wanted to tell the students, hey, I just want you to create a project, and I want you to go ahead and do a slideshow presentation, I want you to do a drawing, and I want you to do a document, I could simply just type that in the instructions and assign it, and then all of the students would see that in their stream. If you just kind of think about the things that you do already in your assignments, you can still do that using Google Classroom. So I'm just going to click on Chapter 2, and I'm going to say Assign, and I just wanted to show you what that topic looks like. So up at the top, I'm going to go over here and see now over here I have Chapter 2. If I click on Chapter 2, there's Chapter 2. If I click on Chapter 5, there's Chapter 5. So you can see using those topics, that's just a really easy way to sort. Now at this point, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to bring over a window. I have a student in this class. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this window over so you guys can see this window. So here he's coming over. And this is Fred Flintstone. So this is one of the students in Wilma Flintstone's class. And you can see how it looks a little bit different because Wilma Flintstone is up here. Fred Flintstone is over here in the corner, so I can see that Fred is logged on because that's his account. And then I see over here Chapter 2. These are all the posts that I just created, so Chapter 2, any questions. And then I have which Google app do you have the most experience with. So down here, I'll just scroll down here for a second. This was the question that Wilma created, and she made it a multiple choice question. So if Fred would say, okay, what Google app do you have the most experience with? Let's say he says Google Docs, and he clicks on Submit. Click on Submit again. Now Wilma will get that answer. Now a couple things that you notice right here with that question, the teacher has the ability, if they want the students to see the answers, if they kind of want to see like a poll down here, they can go ahead and see that as well. But this was just a question. I chose multiple choice, so that's how that one is answered. If I scroll up a little bit, if I go ahead and say any questions, this was the short answer question. So I'll just say, here's my answer, and I'm going to click on Submit, and again, Submit. So, and now Fred has, over here, he can see his classmates' answers because Wilma has allowed that as a teacher. So that's what all those sliders were at the bottom, where they would be able to see each other's answers or not see each other's answers. So that's what it looks like on the student side. Up here at the top, again, students do not see that word students, rather they see that word classmates instead. So if I would go ahead and click on that, then I'm going to go ahead and see all my other classmates, but I'm not going to have any extra abilities here like the teacher does. However, if I click on that About page, I'm going to see all of the resources that Wilma has put out there because Wilma's the teacher, and then she put it out there, and now Fred can see it because he's part of that class. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Stream again. I'm going to move Fred out of the way, and I'm going to go back to that assignments part just for a second. And I'll just show you real quick, if I click on this plus sign and I create an assignment, over here we'll just name it Journal Entry, and I'll just say Journal right there. Now, if I wanted to attach a file, so let's say I'm going to go ahead and go to my Drive, and I wanted to give them a journal, but maybe I already have something created in my Drive that I want to attach. So I can go ahead and go through my Drive, and I can find something, so I'll just put this one right here, and I'll just say Add. Now, what I get over here, which I think this is just such a great part about Google Classroom, is over here it says students can view the file, students can edit the file, or make a copy for each student. So if you think about yourself as a teacher going to the copier and making a copy for each student of this document, this part right here, make a copy for each student, is exactly what that is doing, only it's doing it digitally. And so what happens if I make a copy for each student and then I click on Assign, this will take this Google Docs showcase right here and it will put it in the Google Drive account of each student. So if I go over to Fred's and I look at his Google Drive and I look at Classroom and I bring this over, I can go ahead and show you what that looks like. So I'm going to just drag this window over one more time. So this is Fred's. And I'm looking at my Drive and I'm looking at Classroom, and these are all of the classes that Fred is enrolled in. And this first one says Google Overview Class 101. So if I double click on that, here is that document that Wilma just assigned, Google Docs Showcase - Fred Flintstone. So all of that happened just by the teacher clicking on Make a Copy for each student. And then it automatically created it and tagged it with the naming convention - the student's name. So of course he can go ahead and fill out his assignment and he can turn it in and Wilma can grade it and all that stuff. And that's kind of how the start of all that grading works out. And a lot of the grading parts, if you're coming back for our Google Classroom Part 2, we're going to focus a lot of that on the grading parts because there's lots of neat things that you can do with grading. I just wanted to show you in this Part 1 of how you can go ahead and use that plus sign and add an assignment and push out documents to your class. Of course, if I go back to edit here, the other options that you had, instead of each student will get a copy, the other options were each student can view a copy. So maybe you just wanted to push out some sort of chapter review or some sort of spelling list or something where they would just have view rights. Or the other one was students can edit the copy. So then I would just be careful about that one. If you have 30 kids in your class and you give them all edit rights, then all 30 kids would have edit rights to that same file. So one of the reasons why you might want to do edit rights is if you had group work or maybe you only had 5 students in there or you had a smaller group where each student would edit that particular copy. Most of the time you're probably going to choose each student will get a copy because, again, you're pushing out some sort of an assignment where you want the students to be able to access that. So really, really neat parts of Classroom. Again, if Fred's in there, it's just a Google Doc, so he can go ahead and finish his work, and then he could turn it in. And once he does that, this done number will go ahead and change to 1, and then Wilma will she can click on how many people are done and not done, and she'll be able to see each individual file. So, for instance, I have 2 monitors here. I'll just open up this file. So Fred is in here. If I click on Fred's file right here as a teacher, I can go ahead and see, and it'll show me here in a second that Fred is actually in this file, and it'll pop up, there's Fred, and so there's Fred's cursor. So, you know, if you understand Google Docs, if you've used Google Docs before, it's kind of the same idea where I'm sending out files and 2 people are sharing that file, the student and the teacher, and then the student can go ahead and turn in that file, and the teacher can then grade it. So really, really neat. It's kind of Google Classroom pretty much does all that sharing for you. So you don't really even need to share files anymore if you're making a copy for each student. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to this next part here of this presentation. And we're going to go ahead and talk about some other things that we can do within Google Classroom. So over here on the side, if you look up in the side, if you're in Google Classroom, if you're looking at your own Google Classroom class, I see these 3 lines up in the top corner, and this is the Classroom main menu. We call this our hamburger menu. We're big food people. If you remember, we called it the waffle menu with the apps launcher, and now this is the hamburger menu. So we're going to go ahead and click on that, and we get lots of different options. So way at the beginning where we were looking for that plus sign, if we are in our Classroom class and we're looking to create another class, we're going to go ahead and click on that little hamburger menu in the corner and go ahead and click on Classes. And this is where we're going to find that plus sign again. So here it is. I can join a class or I can go ahead and create a class. Here's where also I see all my other classes. So I'm looking at all of my classes right here. Now, if you remember when we were looking at those posts, each one of those posts had these 3 dots in the corner. So just like it's had in the post, we also have it here. If I click on these 3 dots, I get the option I can edit it. So that would be maybe if I want to change the title of my class, I want to rename it, or I can go ahead and archive it. So we're going to go ahead and click on Archive. And what happens when we archive this class, because I get this question a lot too, where people will say, okay, the semester is over or the quarter is over, what do I do with my classes? Do I delete them? Do I archive them? What's the difference? And, you know, here's my answer. With your educational accounts, you have unlimited space. So there's no real reason to delete them unless you don't want them at all. But what I would definitely recommend that you do is to archive them. When you're done using them, when you're done teaching them, go ahead and archive. Archive is different than deleting them. If you archive them, it kind of puts them in this archived folder where then if you ever want to bring them back, you can go ahead and do that. Or if you want to permanently delete them, you can do that as well. So I'll just show you what this looks like when I click on Archive. So I'm going to go ahead and archive this class. It goes away. Now, when I go up to my hamburger menu in the corner and I scroll down all the way down to the bottom, I get this folder that says Archived Classes. Now, again, if you're following along on your own page and you're looking and you're saying, well, wait a minute, Christy, I don't have an Archived Classes folder. That's probably because you don't have any archived classes. So this folder will only pop up when you actually have archived classes. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up, and I see all these classes that I have archived. So at this point, if I want to restore this class, I can certainly do this, or if I want to permanently delete this class, I can do that also. So I get that option. So really, I'm gonna restore it just for this webinar, but really, when you say deleting a class, it's really a two-step process because you're gonna archive it and then you're going to delete it. All right, other things under this main menu, this classroom main menu or our hamburger menu, you saw right underneath this word classes is our calendar. So when I click on calendar, this is going to show me the Google Classroom calendar that is within Google Classroom. Now, if I'm a student, I can choose if I want to see all my classes, if I just want to see a couple classes, and of course, if you're a teacher, you can do the same thing. But notice how this question that I just posted is now in my calendar, and also another question that I just posted is also in my calendar. So these are the things that go into your calendar automatically, and so that's really neat. I can also, of course, cycle through the different weeks if I wanted to find something specific. Now, there is also a Google Calendar integration piece to this, which I'll show you here in a second. But just by clicking on that word calendar, it does default to the Google Calendar within Google Classroom. So here's Wilma, and I can see off to the side, here are all of my Google Classroom classes. So I have English 10, English 9, I have a whole bunch of them, and here's my Google overview. So again, I didn't do anything to that. Google Classroom automatically put those calendars inside calendar for me. So here's my question, and then here's another question. So when we say it has that integration piece to it, it really does because it puts it inside Google Calendar, and then it also puts it inside Classroom for me. So all by going to that hamburger menu up in the top corner. All right, so some other things that are all within this hamburger menu up in the top corner, I have the classes and it lists them for me, any classes that I'm teaching, and then any classes that I'm enrolled in. Now, if you remember, I said at the beginning that a teacher can be a student and also a teacher. So it's going to keep track of any classes that you're teaching and any classes that you're enrolled in. So it's going to tell me any work that I have to do, so any work that I need to be reviewed or any work that I have reviewed, so it's going to show all of that. It's going to keep track of it. So sometimes it might even be helpful when you first log into Google Classroom, if you're a teacher, just go ahead and click on this work. And this will pull up everything, kind of like a whole big picture of all the things that you have to grade without going into each individual class. I'm going to scroll down here, down towards the bottom. Here's my archived classes once again. That was that folder that automatically got created once I archived a class. And then way down at the bottom it says settings. So down here, I just want to point out a couple things. Send email notifications. This box is checked by default. And sometimes teachers will ask me the question because when you start doing Google Classroom, you're going to notice that you do get a lot of emails. So you're going to get emails when people make comments. You're going to get emails when, people have questions and so forth. And sometimes teachers love that and sometimes they hate it. And so this is the box where you can turn that on and off, where if you don't want any email notifications, you can simply uncheck that box and then you won't get any email notifications for anything. I do want to make note, though, if you do check or uncheck this box, rather, and students send you messages, like they'll maybe make a comment or they'll maybe make a private comment, which we haven't talked too much about in this webinar. We'll talk more about in the second part to this. If you have unchecked this box, you will not get those. So, it's kind of a catch-22, excuse me, a catch-22 as far as if you want those emails or not. One of the tricks, I think, to this is, for me anyway, is I keep this turned on and I've created a filter in my email and named it like Google Classroom. And so then anytime an email comes in from Google Classroom, it will automatically go to a folder for me where I don't really see it. And then if, I want to kind of go back maybe once a day or, once a week or whatever you think is realistic for you, I can go back and look for anything that may need attention. But it's not really clogging up my inbox by everything going in there. So that might be just something to consider. Either way, though, under that settings, under the three lines or the hamburger menu up in the top corner, and then down the settings, that's where you're going to go ahead and change, check, or uncheck that box that says send email notifications. All right, so I'm going to click on my hamburger menu once again. I'm going to scroll up to the top. I'm going to click on classes because this is kind of our home base right up here, classes. and this is where all of my classes are now listed here. Another question I get lots of times is, can I reorder these classes? So if I take this one, can I move it around? At this current time, you cannot do that. So my recommendation to you, if you are just getting started with Google Classroom, is when you create your classes, like if you want period 1 to be here and then period 2, period 3, period 4, I would create period 8 or period 7 first, and then that way that one will be at the bottom, and then it will go ahead and kind of cycle through all the way so that period 1 would be the first one up at the top. Hopefully that will be something that will come in time with Google, but right now you cannot reorder them by dragging and dropping. So I'm just kind of saying because I get that question a lot from people, so hopefully that will be helpful. I'm going to go ahead and click on my overview one more time. All right, so I am about out of time. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to pop back over to my presentation. I'm going to make this full screen. Here's my name, my email address again, my phone number. If you guys, I'm keeping an eye on that chat box as well as I know Chris. If you guys have any questions, feel free to send that through the chat. You can also certainly email me or call me. I do want to point out a couple last parts to this webinar. Thank you for attending. A couple people asked for a copy of this presentation, so here is that copy. That's the shortened link down at the bottom. Once again, this webinar is recorded, and all of this will be posted out on our training.nowaka.org website. So feel free to visit that later on, and you can get a copy of this webinar. Or if you want it right now of the presentation, you can go ahead and just type in that short URL, and then you get a copy. Here's our tech tips, which we talked about a little bit earlier. I do want to talk just for a minute about our Google Educators group. We do lots of neat things within our Google Educators group. I am one of the co-leaders for our Google Educators group, and we have an event coming up in Perrysburg in March, totally free. It's going to be an all-day event, and you can come and you can attend it, get some CEU credit if you'd like to present. Of course, we welcome presenters as well. And you can go ahead and get some information about Google. Once again, totally free. You can just visit that link and find out more information about it. For the CEUs for this webinar, and this goes through our NOWAKA system, so usually about 2 in the morning, you will get an email from our NOWAKA FileMaker system asking you to fill out an evaluation. Now, the evaluation is a Google form, so once you fill it out, the first page is just, your evaluation of this webinar. And then the second page of the evaluation is going to be your first name and your district and your last name and so forth. When you click on Submit, you will actually get within a couple minutes, really, your CEU certificate will be delivered directly to your inbox for email. Thank you so much for attending our first Google Classroom webinar. The second part to this series is in a couple weeks. So feel free to visit our training.nowaka.org website to look for all of those other dates. And thank you for attending, and we hope to see you back for another webinar.